Big Will. How you doing, man?
All right, Casey. So I'm curious. So, am I talking to Kevin Calabro or am I talking to Sean Connery? I don't know who
Well,
this is right here.
it's Sean Connery. Earlier it was David Letterman.
Oh, it's way too short to
Yeah,
be David
yeah.
Letterman.
Now that I got more time on my hands, I'm probably going to go down to the mall and see if they will allow me to be Santa Claus at a 15-foot distance at the mall. So we'll see if I can figure that out.
Oh man!
Hey,
Look at this guy.
Thanks for being with us. At some point, George Carl may call in, so we're going to get George on the line with us as well here at some point. Dwayne Casey's going to be with us in a few moments as well, Will. But I wanted to get you on, obviously, talk about your observations of playing with Michael Jordan in that great documentary that kind of kept us all on life support from a basketball standpoint when it came out in the spring. The timing of that documentary couldn't have been any better because at that point, obviously, the league had been shut down in mid-March and we were all jonesing for basketball. And it was great to get in the Wayback Machine and go back to the day when, Michael Jordan was wreaking terror on the NBA and winning championships. And I know you and I talked shortly after it came out. You did a terrific job as being one of those voices and one of those narrators, one of those guys that was there in the locker room that observed Jordan on a day-to-day basis. And I can't say enough for the job you guys did, but talk a little bit about you were there, 7 years in Chicago with 3 championships.
Yes, sir.
And playing with Michael Jordan. What was your first encounter with Michael Jordan as a rookie coming out of Vanderbilt? Or had you met him before at some point and crossed paths?
No, I had not. I did not meet Michael Jordan until our first practice. So the day before when we had our team meeting, the night before training camp started. Phil Jackson brought that time it was Doug Collins brings everybody in. We have a team meeting at the multiplex, which is the practice facility we were using. And we had a meeting the night before training camp started. Because you remember back in the day, training camp at that time always started on the first Friday of October. So we met that Thursday night. That was the first time we had any type of face-to-face interaction. And, prior to that, he had already made a comment about me, not even knowing me, about, I'm not sure how good he is, but he obviously isn't good enough to play in the Big Ten. Otherwise, he would have went to Purdue. So, and that's not the exact quote that he made, but he made some snarky off-the-cuff comment regarding that and the reason people ask a lot, well, why did he make that comment? And I said, well, he didn't know who I was. I played in the SEC. He watched ACC basketball when he could. And then when you're in Chicago, remember, this was back in the late 80s, 1988. You only watched what was on in your region. So in the city of Chicago, what was on? Big Ten. So, he either watched Big Ten local or somehow watched North Carolina or other ACC basketball. So I could pretty much assure you he didn't watch any SEC basketball. But, needless to say, it was a little intimidating. And the very next day, even with the first, training camp that morning at 10 a.m., I'd heard stories, but I immediately saw how competitive and cutthroat he was from the get-go. Even in just the drills, you're like, hey, man, this is day 1, practice 1. This dude's out for blood already. It's like, what has he been doing all summer? Just, did he have this date highlighted on his calendar getting ready for the upcoming season?
Yeah. Did he call you Vanderbilt?
He called me Will Vanderbilt because that's kind of where the Purdue thing came from. He said I didn't deserve to have a Big Ten last name, but I slowly and eventually worked my way into his, I wouldn't say good graces, but better graces. Because the one thing I thought I always had, KC, was a really good work ethic, and plus after I saw him, that even improved even more. But he always saw me in the weight room. He always saw me coming in early, leaving late. So he knew that I was putting in the time. I made improvements in small increments, throughout my career. But one of the things I was always proud of is, my minutes per game increased, my points, my rebounds, my blocks. The more minutes I played, the better my production. And that came slowly but surely.
Just on the scale of where we are now, the nature of the game now, the rules of the game now. What would Jordan be doing with today's rules, the stringent defensive rules, where you now the emphasis is on freedom of movement for the offensive player and the 3-point shot and spreading the floor? What's his game look like with today's rules?
Well, listen, I talk about how guys that play now could adapt to the way we played in the 80s and 90s, and they just wouldn't have as many points per game, but they still would probably be all-stars, just not superstars.
Right.
That's why I think it would be much easier for a guy like Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or Larry Bird to adapt to the rules the way they are now, because you can't hold, you can't grab, can't use the arm bar, to try to can't put a hand on the guy's hip. I seriously believe there would be probably 4 or 5 games throughout the year where Michael might actually try to break Wilt's record because of the way the rules are played, and he knowing his reputation and the favorable whistle that he always gets, what he would be able to do. And it would probably be after, so now you're talking about social media, you're talking about 12 different shows a day on ESPN and Fox. Somebody would be dumb enough to challenge him, not necessarily challenge him to score 100 points, but basically make some comment about how he's not the best player, or he's starting to lose a step, or, there's people challenging him on Mount Rushmore. And he would go out and have that game to shut everybody up. And one of those things would be, probably challenge Wilt's 100-point game, because you think about it, as he got older, he worked on his game, much like LeBron did, much like Kobe did, in the sense that, now the 3-point shot was a weapon, not just a threat, but a weapon. So you think about mixing up the 3-point shot, the mid-range shot, the ability to get to the rim, and free throws. I would say that there's an 80-20 chance that he would get 100 or more in a single game.
And then conversely, let's take LeBron back to the 80s and 90s. With his obvious physical gifts, his quickness, his size, his work ethic, obviously, just his great gifts. What's he look like back in the 80s and 90s?
He's probably a guy like a combination of a Larry Bird, a Magic Johnson. He's a guy like myself, who used to be anchored in the lane and protecting the rim. He would be a guy that when he's trucking down the lane and he's beat his man on the dribble and you're supposed to come over and help, there would be no thoughts of taking a charge. My only thought would be wrap him up, keep him on the ground, because once he gets airborne, even if you go up to try to foul him hard, there's a good chance you're going to bounce off and you're going to be part of a highlight film. Because that's the one thing I always say, when people want to compare Michael and LeBron. Michael was 6'6", 225. LeBron's 6'8". I know they list him at 250, but he's more like 265, 270.
Yeah.
And I always tell the story, KC, that when I was doing the Cavaliers playoffs one year in the Eastern Conference Finals, Brian Urlacher came to the game. And after the game, Brian Urlacher and LeBron were talking. And he made Urlacher look like a wide receiver, a free safety. And you're talking about one of the meanest, toughest middle linebackers to ever play the game, but he made that dude look tiny. That's just how big he is. And I don't think people that have never met him in person or actually been to a game and sat on the floor truly understand how big and strong and powerful he is.
So LeBron's 35. Let's project a little bit now that we're just kind of fantasizing. Let's say he's 40 years old, and I think he could play to 40. What's his game look like at the age of 40?
Well, he's probably, more of a facilitator. He's probably setting guys up down in the paint. He's shooting a lot more threes to help spread out the defense, because now he doesn't want to drive down the lane and take the physical beating. Listen, you can still foul a guy hard. You can still put a body on a guy, but he's probably only playing 60 games a year. And, same type of thing. Every once in a while, he comes out one night and he feels real good, and mentally he pushes himself, and physically, he'll drop, he'll give you 30, 14, and 12 assists just to send a little reminder that says, I'm still here, I'm still okay, but I'm saving myself for the playoffs.
Yeah, which is something he could do definitely next year. And that will be interesting to see if he's able to do that. I mean, to cut back, because I just don't. He just doesn't impress me as a guy that's going to be able to do that. He just wants to play all the time.
Well, he does, but I think now that he's won, now if he doesn't win that championship this past season,
yeah,
I think he tries to play every game possible to give them the best possible record. But now that they've won that championship in LA,
mm-hmm.
I think that he kind of ratchets it back a little bit in the regular season in the sense that, he'll play as long as he feels well. But I imagine we'll see a lot of DNP, CDs, coaches' decisions, meaning he'll be wearing a sweatsuit on the bench, but he won't play. And that's where the head coach has to really, have that honest conversation with him about, hey, and no disrespect to any team, but if you're playing a team and that's not playing well that year, and there's an opportunity where you as a coach and an organization think you can win without them, you'll probably rest them. But you're also constantly keep an eye on what the standings are, where you stand. And, it can come back to bite you, but this, being in Seattle, being in Portland, teams try to place themselves accordingly as you get towards the end of the year, because there are certain teams that maybe are just bad matchups. And if you want to meet them, you really don't want to meet them till the conference finals.
Well, you won 3 championships with Chicago. You won in the lockout shortened year with the San Antonio, 4 championships. What was the best celebration of the 4 that you partook in?
Probably that first one with Chicago, because we weren't expected to win that. We weren't expected to beat the Lakers. We had finally gotten to the finals as an organization, but we had not been there before. The Lakers had been there. They were experienced, and it started off, with Magic Johnson. So, even though we were up late in that first game, we still end up losing, and everybody's like, well, see, there you go. There's experience. Mm-hmm. That's what happens when you've went to the finals, you've won finals. You can lean heavily on that experience, even when you're down for a majority of the game. Because remember, we had the better record. The first 2 games were in Chicago, because back then, it was they had gone to the 2-3-2.
Right.
And what happens? We win 4 straight, and we end up winning the series 4-1. But that had to do with Michael and obviously John Paxson. But I tell you, we always give John Paxson a hard time, because it's needless to say, we were on the West Coast, so there was a 3-hour time difference. The Today Show needed a Bulls representative to be on the show at 7 in the morning. So they just pulled Pax out of the party that was still going on West Coast time at 4 in the morning. And he was still somewhat coherent, so he could do the interview. But we joked that he kind of looked like the young kid that was blushing the whole time, because his cheeks were all rosy red, his eyes were bloodshot. But needless to say, it was quite humorous, but he did an excellent job. And we pretty much just went straight from the party to the bus to the plane, and then just the number of people that were waiting for us at the airport, to the parties, and to the celebration at Grant Park. And, it was something to behold. And, for a day, and I always say this, for a day, we took over what everybody still understands is a Bears town.
Yeah, so true. Well, Will, hey, thanks for joining, man. I really appreciate it very much, you joining us. Let's stay in contact and have a good winter.
Well, I had a question
Yes,
for
sir.
you. If you could possibly send a message, I think it's to Coach Turner, correct?
Correct, Rick Turner.
I'm willing to volunteer as an assistant. And my understanding is that training is year-round, so I need to be in Jamaica for training.
Yeah.
So if they just provide housing and a little per diem so I can buy some food, I'm in.
And the golf courses are very good in Montego Bay, I'm told.
Oh, I don't have time to play golf. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Big Will. Appreciate it, man.
All right, Sean Connery. Good talking with you.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later. There he goes. Will Perdue out of Vanderbilt, teammate of Michael Jordan.